February 13, 1983, Los Angeles Forum. Marvin Gaye stood at center court. 17,505 people watched him. Millions waited by their television sets. He was about to sing America's most sacred song. As he approached the microphone, his hands trembled. Behind his dark sunglasses, his eyes filled with fear. But nobody could see. Nobody could know that this man had been missing for hours. Nobody could know that he had been crying at home, staring at his mirror, whispering, "My voice is gone." 2 minutes later, when he finished what would become the most unforgettable national anthem performance in American history, the applause thundered through the arena. Marvin walked straight off the court. He spoke to no one. He looked at no one. He was running. In that moment, nobody understood that Marvin Gaye had just given his final gift to America. And now he had no reason left to live. The phone calls had been coming all morning. Lon Rosen, Marvin's promoter, checked his watch again. It was past noon. The NBA All-Star game would begin in hours, and the man scheduled to sing the national anthem was nowhere to be found. Rosen had a backup plan. He kept a local hostess on standby, someone he had met in high school years ago. She could step in if needed. But this was supposed to be Marvin Gaye's moment. This was supposed to be his triumphant return to live television after the success of Sexual Healing. The forum was buzzing with activity. Players were warming up. Camera crews were setting up their equipment. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Marvin Gaye was losing his mind. In his bedroom, Marvin stared at himself in the mirror. The cocaine he had smoked earlier wasn't helping with the anxiety. It was making everything worse. His reflection looked hollow, defeated. When he tried to hum a few bars, his voice came out weak and scratchy. "I can't do this," he whispered to the empty room. "My voice is gone. They'll hear it. Everyone will hear it." The drug use had become his daily routine, a desperate attempt to silence the voices in his head that told him he was worthless. But the cocaine that promised relief only amplified his fears. Every shadow in the room felt threatening. Every distant sound might be someone watching him, judging him, waiting for him to fail. He had been up for 36 hours straight, smoking freebase in his bedroom while playing the same piano chords over and over. The same 3 chords. A minor progression that somehow captured everything he felt about his life. Empty, desperate, ending. His hands shook as he reached for the pipe again. Just one more hit to calm his nerves. Just enough to get through this performance. But the drug that was supposed to give him confidence was eating him alive from the inside. The financial pressure was crushing him. The IRS wanted millions in back taxes. His ex-wives were demanding alimony payments he couldn't afford. His second marriage to Janice Hunter had collapsed in a bitter divorce that left him broke and broken. The success of Sexual Healing had given him hope. But hope was a luxury he could no longer afford. More than the money, more than the legal troubles, Marvin was drowning in something deeper. The little boy who had been beaten by his preacher father was still alive inside him, still waiting for approval that would never come. Standing before America to sing its anthem felt like standing before his father again, waiting to be told he wasn't good enough. In his paranoid state, he was convinced that this performance was a setup, that people wanted him to fail publicly, that the NBA had chosen him specifically because they knew he was broken, because they wanted to humiliate him on national television. The logical part of his mind knew these thoughts were irrational, but logic had been drowned out by months of drug use and sleepless nights. The phone rang. It was Rosen again. "Marvin, where are you? We need you here now." "I'm coming," Marvin said, but his voice was barely audible. "I'm coming." He hung up and looked at himself one more time. The man in the mirror wasn't a soul legend. He wasn't the Prince of Motown. He was just a frightened child who had learned to hide his pain behind sunglasses and smooth vocals. But he had to go. There was no choice. There never had been. By the time Marvin arrived at the forum, Rosen had already prepared his backup singer. The relief on Rosen's face was visible from across the parking lot. Marvin walked into the building like a man walking to his execution. The arena was massive, intimidating. Sound checks were happening everywhere. The noise was overwhelming. Marvin's paranoia, amplified by months of cocaine use, made him feel like every conversation was about him. Every glance was judgment. He found a quiet corner and sat down. His hands were shaking, not from nerves but from withdrawal. He needed another hit, but there wasn't time. There was never enough time. Security guards walked past him repeatedly. In his altered state, Marvin was convinced they were watching him, reporting his behavior to someone. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself and kept his sunglasses on despite being indoors. A production assistant approached him with a smile. "Mr. Gaye, we're so honored to have you here. This is going to be amazing." Marvin nodded but said nothing. Amazing wasn't the word he would use. Terrifying was more accurate. The assistant continued, "We'll have you at center court right after the player introductions. The microphone will be live, so whenever you're ready, just step up and begin." "What if I can't?" Marvin asked quietly. The assistant assumed he was joking and laughed. "You'll be fine. You're Marvin Gaye." But being Marvin Gaye was the problem. Being Marvin Gaye meant expectations he couldn't meet. Being Marvin Gaye meant perfection when he felt completely imperfect. He excused himself to the bathroom, where he splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection under the harsh fluorescent lights. The man looking back at him was a stranger. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, desperate. This wasn't the smooth crooner who had seduced millions with his voice. This was a broken man holding himself together with stimulants and sheer willpower. The player introductions were happening. Magic Johnson's name echoed through the arena. Julius Erving waved to the crowd. These were men at the top of their game, confident and powerful. Marvin watched them and felt like a fraud. When his moment came, the announcer's voice boomed, "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the singing of our national anthem by Grammy award-winning artist Marvin Gaye." The applause was polite, expectant. 17,000 people rose to their feet. Millions more stood in their living rooms. Marvin walked to center court, each step feeling like it might be his last. At the microphone, he paused. The arena fell silent. He could hear his own heartbeat. He could feel the weight of every eye on him. This was the moment he had been dreading and craving in equal measure. He began with a drum machine beat, slow and hypnotic. Nothing like what anyone expected for the national anthem. The rhythm transformed the arena from a temple of athletic competition into something more intimate, more personal. When Marvin opened his mouth to sing, something unexpected happened. The voice that had felt so uncertain in his bedroom mirror found its power in the groove. "Oh, say, can you see?" became something entirely new. He dropped the opening "oh," starting instead with "say, can you see?" and immediately the rhythm changed everything. This wasn't the national anthem anyone knew. This was Marvin's story told through America's song. When he sang about the land of the free and the home of the brave, his voice carried the weight of his own struggles with freedom and courage. He wasn't singing about abstract concepts. He was singing about a man trapped by his own demons, searching for bravery in the face of overwhelming fear. The crowd began to respond in ways national anthem audiences never responded. They started clapping to the rhythm. They began swaying. Some called out encouragement as if they were in church instead of at a basketball game. Magic Johnson would later describe it. "We were two-stepping, listening to the national anthem. We were just bouncing left to right. It blew us away." Julius Erving felt the historical significance. You knew it was history, but it was also hood. For 2 minutes, the basketball world revolved around Marvin Gaye. Within his gravitational pull were MVPs, world champions, future Hall of Famers, and 17,000 people who forgot they were supposed to be watching a game. As Marvin approached the climax, stretching out the word brave, his voice showed both power and vulnerability. There was a breathiness to it, a sense that he was giving everything to this moment. When he exhaled, "Oh Lord, woo," the sound carried both triumph and exhaustion. For a split second after he finished, there was complete silence. Robert Parrish later described it, like nobody could believe what they just heard. Then the eruption, 17,000 people cheering not just for patriotism, but for artistry. Players high-fived each other. The moment felt both sacred and revolutionary. Marvin stepped back from the microphone, nodded once, and walked straight off the court. He didn't stop to acknowledge the ovation. He didn't wait for interviews. The sound of 17,000 people celebrating followed him down the tunnel, but he couldn't feel their joy. All he felt was emptiness. A reporter tried to intercept him near the exit. "Marvin, that was incredible. Can you tell us about— No, Marvin said without stopping. His voice was barely audible above the distant applause still echoing from the arena. He walked out of the building and disappeared into the Los Angeles night, leaving behind the greatest performance of his career and taking nothing with him but the same pain he had carried in. Lon Rosen never saw him again that day. What Marvin didn't know was that he had just created one of the most influential performance moments in American sports history. His arrangement would inspire Whitney Houston's legendary Super Bowl performance 8 years later. Houston would say that Gaye's version was the only rendition of the national anthem she had ever liked. More immediately, Marvin had also created controversy. NBA Commissioner Larry O'Brien confronted Rosen during the first quarter with what Rosen would later describe as a very colorful conversation about the appropriateness of the performance. Phone lines lit up with callers complaining about the liberties taken with a sacred song. But something fundamental had shifted. The national anthem would never be quite the same again. Marvin had opened a door for artistic interpretation that countless performers would walk through in the years to come. For Marvin himself, the performance represented both an ending and a beginning. It was one of his last major television appearances, marking the end of his comeback tour's promotional phase. Within months, he would begin a grueling tour that would expose his declining health and increasing paranoia to everyone around him. The tour would be plagued by the demons he had managed to hide during that perfect 2-minute performance at the Forum. His voice would become increasingly unreliable. His stage fright would worsen. His financial problems would multiply. By the time the tour ended in August 1983, he would be a shadow of the man who had commanded the NBA All-Star audience. In backstage interviews during those tour dates, when journalists asked about the Forum performance, Marvin's responses grew increasingly detached. He spoke about it as if it belonged to someone else, as if he couldn't connect the success of the moment to his own efforts. "I don't remember much about it," he would tell a reporter in Detroit. "I was scared. I almost didn't show up. Sometimes I wish I hadn't." The interviewer pressed him about the overwhelming positive response, the standing ovation, the way he had transformed the song. "People hear what they want to hear," Marvin said quietly. "They saw a performance. I felt like I was dying." Those close to him noticed that he never watched footage of the performance. When television stations replayed it during news segments or retrospectives, Marvin would leave the room. The triumph that America celebrated had become a source of pain for its creator. The contradiction was heartbreaking. He had given everything he had to that moment, had channeled his deepest pain into something transcendent, and yet he couldn't bear to witness what he had achieved. The applause that had thundered through the Forum had faded, but the emptiness that had driven him to the microphone remained. The success felt hollow. The applause faded quickly. By the time he reached his car, the familiar emptiness had returned. He had given America something beautiful, something transcendent. But he couldn't give himself peace. The demons that had driven him to that perfect performance were the same demons that would destroy him. The paranoia that had nearly kept him from showing up would only intensify. The financial pressures that had motivated his return to performing would multiply. Within a year, he would move back into his parents' house, officially to care for his ailing mother, but really because he had nowhere else to go. The same house where his father's resentment and his own childhood traumas waited for him like patient predators. The house on Gramercy Place became his prison. The same rooms where he had been beaten as a child now witnessed his final deterioration. His mother, Alberta, tried to protect him from his father's increasingly volatile moods, but she was fighting her own battle with illness. Marvin Gaye Sr. resented his son's presence. The man who had preached about salvation while practicing cruelty could not accept that his famous son had returned home, broken and defeated. The tension in the house was suffocating. Father and son, both damaged in their own ways, circled each other like wounded animals. In those final months, Marvin would often sit at the piano, playing those same 3 chords from the morning of the NBA performance. The minor progression that had haunted him. His mother would listen from the next room, tears in her eyes, knowing that her son was composing his own requiem. He spoke frequently about the Forum performance to anyone who would listen, but not with pride. He talked about it like a man obsessed with his own execution. "I should have stayed home," he told his brother Frankie one evening. "I should have let them find someone else." But it was beautiful, Marvin, Frankie replied. People still talk about it. That's the problem, Marvin said quietly. It was too beautiful. Now they expect me to be that person. But that person doesn't exist anymore. On April 1st, 1984, one day before his 45th birthday, his father would shoot him to death in that house. The argument that led to the shooting began, witnesses said, when Marvin Gaye Sr. complained about his son's music being too loud. The same music that had moved millions, the same voice that had transformed America's anthem, silenced by the man who had given him life and taken away his peace. Looking back, the NBA All-Star performance takes on prophetic qualities. It was Marvin at his most powerful and most vulnerable, channeling everything he felt about freedom and bravery into a song that had never been sung with such personal investment. For 2 minutes he had been free. For 2 minutes he had been brave. For 2 minutes he had transformed his pain into something beautiful that would outlive him. But 2 minutes wasn't enough to save him from the darkness that consumed the other 525,598 minutes of his final year. The man who gave America its most soulful national anthem couldn't save his own soul. The voice that moved millions couldn't silence the voices in his head. The artist who created transcendent beauty couldn't transcend his own suffering. That performance at the Forum was both his greatest triumph and his final defeat, a moment of perfect artistry born from imperfect humanity, a gift to a nation from a man who had nothing left to give himself.